It was just a speech, 15 pages, 40 attendees, one velvet-lined lectern in the Commonwealth Hall. Camilla had done 100 briefings like this before, but this time she brought her personal phone, left it face down on the glass, unlocked, unsilenced, unregistered. And just as she reached the final line of her speech, the phone rang, loud, echoing, then it answered itself. And what played through the speaker didn't just interrupt the briefing, it shut down the entire hall, because the voice on the other end wasn't random, and the words weren't private. Delete the files before someone checks. Don't let the guards see the payments. Stall her until we're clear. Now, before we show you the moment, a royal guard stepped in. And what Camilla did the instant he seized her phone. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Hit like and press subscribe with the bell icon on, because this wasn't a tech glitch. This was planned exposure, and the guard wasn't supposed to hear it, but he did. Commonwealth Hall had never hosted chaos. That was its distinction. Tucked within Windsor's East Wing, it wasn't grand like the public halls or solemn like the ancestral libraries. It was intentional. A place for soft diplomacy, policy briefings, and quiet announcements, dressed up in velvet chairs and polished oak. No fanfare, no cameras, just silence, protocol, and restraint. That morning, the air smelled faintly of linen polish and the citrusy wax used on the old panelling. The lamps along the walls had been dimmed to their daytime settings, warm, even, and non-invasive. A single crystal carafe sat on the lectern beside a glass tumbler, untouched. Staff moved with low voices and short steps, preparing for what was meant to be a modest address by Queen Camilla regarding a new education initiative. Sergeant Aiden Lockwood stood by the side door, arms behind his back, posture firm. He had only recently returned to Windsor after an extended rotation in Scotland. There, he'd supervised Highland entry briefings and royal transition drills. Dry work, but disciplined. Here it was different. Here, everything whispered, even when it shouted. And Aiden liked that. Protocol was religion in places like this. Camilla had arrived nearly 20 minutes early. That was the first sign something was off. She wasn't composed in the way she normally was. Not cold, but untethered. Her heels clicked as she paced the width of the lectern, voice low as she rehearsed a line and promptly discarded it. Her speech notes were on paper, but she kept unlocking her personal phone, checking something, scrolling fast as if the real lines lived there. Her aide, Elias Brent, hovered just behind her, trying to keep pace. Mum, the phrasing's clean, he murmured. You approved it last night. She waved him off without even looking. Aiden noticed the device. Pale gold case. No Crown Registry markings. A personal unit. By protocol, it should have been logged before entry, even for an informal engagement like this. But no such form had crossed Aiden's clipboard. And this event wasn't classified. Not high security. A technical courtesy, not a violation. Still, something about it itched. He watched as Camilla finally settled behind the lectern, glancing down at the phone one last time before placing it face down beside her speech. Her smile flicked on like a switch as attendees began arriving. Lords, advisors, school heads, council members. Her voice now carried charm. The tension seemed to evaporate. Aiden kept his eyes forward, hands still. Then he saw it. The phone screen lit up under the glass lectern's surface. Just a flicker. A notification. Or a call. No name, just restricted number. Camilla saw it too. Her smile didn't fade, but her fingers reached out and flipped the phone back over, screen down, lips tightening ever so slightly. Aiden noted the moment, didn't log it yet, but the unease in his chest sharpened. The hall was now full, and the briefing was about to begin. Sergeant Aiden Lockwood moved toward the lectern with practiced discretion, careful not to cross directly into the speaking zone. Camilla was still reviewing her notes aloud, soft enough for only Elias Brent to hear. But Aiden had seen enough of these briefings to know when a small adjustment could prevent a technical hiccup. He reached for the adjustable microphone arm and turned it 2 degrees inward to avoid potential overprojection into the rear of the room. As he leaned slightly over the ledge, his eye caught it again. Camilla's personal phone, still unlocked, still active. The screen pulsed faintly from the base, set to a brightness that hadn't auto-dimmed. There was no folder open, no speech notes visible, only the home screen and the faint shadow of a call log notification pushed just off the main view. It vibrated once, then twice, then went still. "Ma'am," Aiden said gently, keeping his tone dry but courteous. "I'd be remiss not to mention, unregistered personal devices aren't permitted active on the lectern during briefings, especially near the mic arm. It can cause distortion or backfeed." Camilla didn't look up from her printed notes. "It's harmless," she said, brushing her hand toward the phone dismissively. "It's where I keep my speaking rhythm. Leave it." Elias tried to intervene with a placating smile. "Just reference cues, Sergeant. She prefers the pacing on her own unit. Completely routine." Aiden gave a measured nod. He didn't push. There was nothing actionable yet. No violation. Just a grey zone courtesy being declined by a senior royal. Not the first time, and likely not the last. Still, he tapped a silent log into his internal wrist pad as he stepped back. Entry 942. Personal device left unregistered on lectern. Declined removal. Logged as Class A courtesy note. He resumed his place on the wall near the south vestibule, eyes moving now across the assembled attendees. 43 in total, a mix of regional trustees, non-profit liaisons, and deputy secretaries from education councils, all calm, all watching the lectern. Camilla cleared her throat. Elias stepped aside, and the speech began. Her voice lifted gently, the cadence light and conversational at first. She thanked them for their time, gestured toward the Education Trust's newest report, and eased into a segment about widening access to digital literacy. The kind of segment the press would have half listened to, but here it felt poised. Aiden exhaled slightly. Routine was good. Then the phone buzzed again. Not a ring, not yet, just a hard, desk-rattling vibration. Camilla's hand hovered near it, but she didn't touch it. She kept speaking. Aiden watched. And now he didn't just log it in his mind, he braced. For a while, it all sounded normal. Camilla's voice drifted through the quiet of Commonwealth Hall with that careful poise she always used when speaking to internal circles. Her tone was steady, rhythmic, measured enough to project warmth without straining credibility. She spoke of outreach programs for rural youth, of digitized classroom kits, of the Crown's intent to listen before it leads. The phrases were crafted, rehearsed, and increasingly polished the longer she spoke. Several heads nodded throughout the rows, pens scratched on paper. Someone whispered an admiring comment to their neighbour. The worst of the tension seemed to have passed. Even Sergeant Aiden Lockwood, still stationed by the south vestibule, began to believe this might end without incident. He let his eyes drift across the hall one more time. No movement near the fire exits. No strange guest badges. No unscheduled lens glinting from undercoat lapels. All routine. Camilla's hand occasionally gestured above the lectern, but it didn't stray toward the phone again. It remained in place, face down, unmoved, like it had decided to behave after all, until it buzzed again. Once, twice. Hard enough that the glass of the lectern audibly vibrated. Camilla's eye twitched, just briefly. She faltered in a sentence, pausing for a word that was already written plainly on her paper. Then she glanced down. Aiden narrowed his gaze. The screen had flipped itself on again, the glow rising faintly through the glass podium from below. The same notification flashed again. No name. Restricted. It was the third time. Still no name. Still no red button pressed. Camilla's fingers hovered briefly, as if contemplating silencing it, or perhaps answering, but she stopped herself. She placed her hand gently over the phone, not forceful, just weight, like it needed to stay quiet. Then she continued the speech. If anyone else noticed, they didn't show it. But Aiden's instincts, sharpened by 12 years of protocol rotations and 5 mid-level incident reviews, were humming now. Something was wrong, not theatrical wrong, not dramatic, just wrong. Because that kind of call, restricted, persistent, and unanswered, wasn't common. Not on personal phones brought inside controlled spaces, not by mistake. Aiden shifted his weight just slightly, adjusting the way his gloved hand rested on the holster strap. Not for weapon access, but because every part of his body had just decided the room wasn't stable anymore. Camilla raised her voice slightly now, entering the flourish of her final policy line, the kind you end on, the kind you design to land. But something in the air had changed, and Aiden felt it before it happened. Camilla reached the crescendo of her address, a neatly crafted sentence about ensuring that every child across the Commonwealth has access to a brighter, better bridged future. She inhaled gently before delivering the final clause. Aiden had seen it rehearsed earlier. It was her closer. But before she could speak, the phone rang. Not a buzz, not a discreet pulse, a full, sharp ringtone. Classical piano over chimes shattered the silence across Commonwealth Hall. It echoed through the oak-lined chamber like it didn't belong to anyone. Then all eyes tracked to the lectern, and the phone lighting up beneath Camilla's palm. Camilla's posture tensed, frozen, mid-breath. Attendees turned in their seats. A murmur rippled up from the second row. Aiden was already moving. By protocol, any unauthorized audio source sounding off during an internal royal briefing was subject to immediate silencing by security personnel. He approached the lectern, eyes locked on the screen, but he didn't reach it in time because the phone answered itself. Automatically. A split second after the third ring, the speaker clicked on, and a male voice, low and urgent, poured into the hall's overhead audio channel. "You shouldn't speak today. They'll ask about the payments. Delete the files before someone checks." Gasps broke out like cracks in glass. One council member's chair scraped loudly against the stone floor. Someone toward the back whispered, "Did she just?" Camilla's face went white. Her hand flew to the phone, but Aiden was faster. He reached the lectern in 2 quick strides, eyes wide but expression controlled, and tapped the mute toggle just as another sentence bled into the speaker. "You need to stall." Aiden's gloved thumb cut the sound mid-phrase. The call didn't end. It simply stopped playing through the speakers, muffled now beneath his palm. Camilla leaned in sharply, hissing in a voice so tight it barely escaped her throat. "Sergeant, hand me the phone, now!" Aiden didn't move. He looked up slowly, deliberately, and met her eyes with quiet finality. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "this device is now under custodial seizure." The words landed with a dull thud, not loud, but heavy. No one in the room moved. No one even breathed. Camilla's lips parted, caught between fury and panic, but she didn't reply. Aiden gently lifted the phone from the lectern, screen still illuminated, the call still active. He turned slightly to shield it from public view, careful not to disconnect or interact further. Then he stepped back, not retreating, but claiming distance. The Queen Consort's device had just played an unauthorized audio transmission. Mid-briefing, mid-sentence. And by every law of royal internal protocol, it now belonged to the chain of evidence. The hall was so silent that Aiden could hear the faint hum of the ceiling vents. Every attendee sat frozen, hands stalled mid-note, pens hovering above paper, breaths held as though releasing them might shatter the room further. Camilla stepped forward, not gracefully, not regally, sharply. Her heels clicked once against the lectern platform as she leaned toward Aiden, lowering her voice to a razor-thin whisper that nevertheless carried to the first 2 rows. "You will return that phone this instant." Aiden kept his posture square, feet evenly planted, the device angled inward against his palm. His tone didn't rise, didn't tighten, didn't change. The steadier the guard, the deeper the impact. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "an unregistered live call inside a briefing hall is a Category 2 breach." Behind Camilla, Elias Brent let out a strangled little sound, half cough, half panic. He stepped forward quickly, hands raised as if to smooth the air like fabric. It must have been spam," he stammered. "A wrong number. Some robol glitch." But no one in the room believed that. They'd all heard the words, "payments, delete the files," before someone checks. Aiden didn't look at the audience. His eyes remained locked on Camilla's, controlled, calm, unwavering. He shifted the phone just slightly farther from her reach, shoulder rotation precise and minimal, keeping custody intact. Camilla straightened, nostrils flaring. "Clear this hall," she said tightly. "Now." Aiden didn't flinch. "Ma'am, evacuation requires a supervisory directive, not a subject of breach request." A gust of whispers rippled across the rows. Camilla turned her head sharply toward them, silencing the entire hall with a glare, then pivoted back to Aiden, voice now seething under her breath. "You are obstructing my address." "No, ma'am," Aiden replied. "I am preventing further breach." Her facade was cracking now, not theatrically, but in the small human ways she couldn't hide. A tremor at the corner of her jaw, a slight tightening of her fingers. A wavering breath she tried to disguise as steady. She stepped even closer, lowering her voice until only Aiden and the front row could hear. "I outrank you." Aiden answered with the slow, deliberate gravity of someone who had repeated protocol in his sleep for his entire career. "Protocol outranks all of us, ma'am." The room stirred. Someone gasped softly. Another murmured, "He's right," before catching themselves. Camilla's eyes widened, rage, disbelief, and a glint of something much deeper, fear. Still shielding the device, Aiden lifted his radio with his free hand. "Internal ops," he said, voice level. "This is Sergeant Lockwood in Commonwealth Hall. Category 2 audio breach involving an unregistered device. Request immediate relay support." Every head turned toward Camilla. Her face was composed again, but only on the surface. Underneath, the unravelling had begun. And Aiden, standing firm with the phone secured against his chest, felt the weight shift in the room. This was no longer her moment. It was the Crown's. With the device still secure in his hand, Sergeant Aiden Lockwood took 3 slow paces back from the lectern, just enough to distance himself from the room, but not from Camilla's line of sight. The hall remained frozen. Dozens of eyes tracked his every movement. No one dared speak, and even the air itself seemed to hesitate. The phone's speaker was still muffled, but the recording hadn't stopped. Aiden turned slightly away from the audience, angling the screen toward himself. His thumb tapped once, not to pause or play, but to isolate the volume so it couldn't leak further. He listened, only long enough. "The private arrangement was handled. Tell her not to worry." A different voice, male, calm, almost smug. "Funds already transferred. Just keep it off the ledger until they stop checking." Aiden's spine locked. Every part of his training reminded him, do not interpret, do not investigate, just confirm scope and stop. But one final line slid through before he tapped mute again, and make sure the guard never sees it. That was enough. He ended playback. Not the call itself. He didn't have clearance for data alteration, but the active listening. His role wasn't to dig, it was to contain. He raised his radio again. "Internal Ops, this is Lockwood. Confirming Category 2 audio exposure. Contents include reference to concealed financial transfers, unverified sender identities, and direct mention of Palace protocol evasion. Potential evidence contamination in progress. Custodial lockdown requested immediately." The line buzzed once with static, then a clipped response. "Acknowledged. Hold position." Response en route. Behind him, Camilla didn't speak, but he could feel her presence now, just off his right shoulder. The stillness had turned electric. She was watching him the way a person watches a sealed door they thought they had locked suddenly begin to open. Her voice, when it came, was barely more than a whisper. "You listened to private correspondence." Aiden didn't turn. "I listened only until the breach met internal escalation thresholds, ma'am." There was a long silence. Then she asked, with something colder beneath it, "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Aiden finally turned his head, just slightly. "I didn't do anything, ma'am. The device did." He looked forward again, eyes focused on nothing now but the far column at the end of the hall, where the first security relay would arrive any minute. And behind him, he heard something shift in Camilla's voice. Not rage, not panic. Something worse. Recognition. She wasn't in control anymore. The voice crackled faintly through Aiden's earpiece less than a minute later. "Lockwood, this is internal ops. Hall is now under soft lockdown. No one enters. No one exits. Maintain custody until contact." Aiden gave a quiet reply. "Confirmed," and lowered his radio. The temperature in Commonwealth Hall dropped by 10 degrees. Staff who'd been fidgeting now froze. Guests who'd begun whispering fell silent. The guards at both vestibule doors snapped inward and braced. The lockdown wasn't loud, wasn't announced, but everyone in the room felt it. Camilla stepped back from the lectern, slowly, mechanically. Then she turned to Elias Brent. Her aide was white as chalk. He stood with his hands clasped behind him, but they were trembling, so badly he had to unfold and refold them every few seconds to keep from showing it. Aiden kept the phone secured against his vest, still turned away, still screen down. But now he was watching Elias carefully. And then he asked calmly, aloud, "Sir, did you know this device would receive that call?" The aide blinked. "Pardon." "The voice on the recording," Aiden said. "It played through Crown Audio Relay. It mentioned file deletions, payment transfers, and a directive to ensure the guard didn't see it." Elias stammered. I don't know what that was. Maybe an old voicemail, some phishing nonsense." He looked at Camilla as he spoke, not at Aiden, as if seeking approval or forgiveness. Camilla snapped her head toward him. "Stop talking." Elias flinched. Aiden calmly reached for his wrist pad and tapped a brief entry. Subject: Elias Brent. Suspicious complicit conduct. Flag for secondary interview. Guests were shifting now. Some reached discreetly for their notebooks. One man in the third row placed his phone face down on his lap without unlocking it, instinctively distancing himself from the tension radiating from the front of the room. Camilla turned back to Aiden. Her voice was different now, lowered, steady, almost conciliatory. "Sergeant, hand me the phone, and I will clarify everything privately. We can resolve this." Aiden didn't move. "Nothing about this is private anymore, ma'am." For a full 10 seconds, Camilla said nothing. Then she turned and walked toward the far archway, stopping just short of the vestibule doors. She didn't try to leave. She just stood there, silent, arms folded, watching the phone in Aiden's hands like it held the entire future of the room, which, in a way, it did. The doors to Commonwealth Hall opened without a knock. 3 figures entered, all in formal internal security attire, no weapons drawn, no raised voices, no visible rush. But the tension followed them in like a shadow. At the centre was Brigadier Rowan Stratton, head of Windsor Internal Security. Ex-military, silver at the temples, sharp-featured, shoulders square beneath the black uniform of Internal Command. Aiden had met him twice before, once during lockdown drills at Balmoral, and once during a perimeter incident that never made the reports. The man radiated calm, the kind that made even royals stand straighter. Without a word to the audience, Stratton walked down the central aisle and stopped directly in front of Sergeant Aiden Lockwood. His voice was clean, low, and perfectly audible. "Sergeant, is the device in your possession?" Aiden nodded once and extended the phone. still warm in his gloved hand. Unregistered, unsecured, and currently in custodial hold. Audio played aloud during the consort's speech. Contents contained references to concealment of funds and deletion of records. Stratton accepted the phone without hesitation, placed it on a sealed tray held by one of the accompanying officers, and tapped a silent code into his own terminal. Camilla stepped forward from the vestibule now, voice rising in practiced outrage. "Brigadier, this is absurd. That call was private. It was planted or mistaken or—" Stratton didn't look at her yet. His eyes remained on the screen for 3 more seconds before he spoke again. A live audio breach occurred during an official royal briefing. The device must be examined. Camilla's tone hardened. "I am telling you, it was tampered with. All the more reason for full verification." She inhaled slowly, preparing another volley. Stratton finally turned his head and met her gaze. There was no aggression in his expression, only command. "Her Majesty will be escorted to the adjoining chamber until we complete first phase verification," he said. One of the officers stepped forward, not to touch, just to indicate direction. A whisper rippled across the audience, a public containment, a royal being sidelined. Camilla didn't move. Her jaw clenched. Her arms remained folded. "I am not under investigation," she said sharply. "You will not treat me like some—" Stratton raised a hand. "Not high, just enough." "Ma'am, you are not being detained. You are being protected from further compromise. If you have nothing to hide, the review will be swift." Another pause. And then, behind her, Elias Brent took a single step back. The kind of instinctive retreat that signalled the battle had already been lost. Camilla stared at Stratton for a full beat, then at the sealed phone tray, then back to Aiden, the man who'd done nothing more than follow the rules. Finally, she turned and walked. Inside the adjoining chamber, Queen Camilla sat with her back rigid against a velvet-lined chair, arms still crossed, lips drawn into a pale line. She could see nothing of the main hall now, only the edge of the archway and the quiet, methodical movements of the forensic team unpacking their mobile terminal. Sergeant Aiden Lockwood remained nearby, standing against the far wall beside Brigadier Stratton, who had assumed quiet command of the scene. The sealed tray containing Camilla's phone now rested on a biometric scanning plate, untouched, unaltered, and under full observation. No one rushed, no one speculated. Only procedure moved now. The lead analyst tapped in a dual authentication key, and the first diagnostic screen blinked to life. "Device unlocked via soft trigger," the analyst explained. "Audio played via onboard recording, not a live call." Aiden's brow twitched. "It wasn't live." The analyst shook his head. "No, sir. It was a pre-recorded voicemail, automatically played through the speaker using a known exploit in the phone's assistive call feature, triggered on the 3rd unanswered call attempt." Brigadier Stratton stepped closer, voice low. "So someone timed the voicemail to activate the moment her speech began." The analyst nodded. They didn't need to be on the call. They just needed to send the message, time the sequence, and let the device betray itself. Aiden exhaled slowly. This wasn't a breach born of laziness. It was deliberate. Someone had set the device up to implode. "And the content?" Stratton asked. "Audio reference to concealed funds, file deletion, and avoidance of guard oversight. No named individuals in what we've reviewed so far, but enough to warrant full archival sync and red flag cross-checks." Camilla's aide, Elias Brent, was seated nearby now, palms pressed to his knees, face ghostly. He hadn't spoken since being escorted from the podium area, but the moment the analyst mentioned funds, he whispered something barely audible. "It wasn't meant to play here." All heads turned. Stratton looked at him sharply. "Repeat that?" Elias didn't blink. He looked only at the table. It was supposed to go off later. Somewhere else. I didn't know she'd bring that phone to the lectern." Camilla's head turned sharply from the adjacent chair, her expression shattered. "What did you just say?" Elias looked at her then, and something in him broke. "You told me to prep the message. You said you'd handle the fallout if it ever leaked. You said no one would trace it. Stratton raised a hand. That's enough. Mr. Brent, you are now suspended from internal access privileges until formal review. He turned to the analyst. Seal the device. Audit chain begins now. Camilla said nothing. She didn't have to. Because now it was official. The exposure hadn't just happened. It had been scheduled. The sound of the evidence tray sealing shut echoed louder than it should have. A quiet, mechanical hiss, then the click of the locking pin. Inside it, Queen Camilla's phone, screen dark, signal disabled, every future swipe frozen in protocol. The case bore a fresh evidence tag, sealed with a silver audit clasp marked WIS Tier 2 for Turn B. Brigadier Stratton signed off the custody ledger with a quiet nod to the forensic team, then turned to Sergeant Aiden Lockwood. Escort the device to Windsor Internal Archives. Do not stop. Do not hand it off. Report directly to Deputy Review. Aiden nodded once. Yes, sir. He reached for the case, carefully, deliberately, and took it with both hands. Behind him, the hall was quiet again, but the silence was different now. Not reverent, watchful. Guests averted their eyes as Camilla was guided from the adjoining chamber back into the room. She no longer walked with performance. No chin lifted in hauteur, no gestures to feign calm. Her expression was unreadable, but her arms were still folded, tightly, protectively. As she passed, no one bowed. No one greeted her. Even her own press secretary, seated toward the back, avoided eye contact. And Aiden? He didn't look at her at all. He simply moved, past the velvet chairs, past the glass lectern, still holding her abandoned notes, past Elias Brent, who now sat with both hands limp in his lap, visibly shaking. Camilla stopped just short of the exit and turned back once. Whether to speak or to glare, no one could tell, but Aiden was already at the threshold. The sealed case in his hands was no longer her possession. And by the time she opened her mouth to say something, anything, he was already gone. The doors shut behind him. The briefing never resumed. Her speech remained incomplete, cut off mid-sentence, mid-word, and by the end of the hour, staff across the palace were already whispering, not about what had been said, but what had been heard. Should a royal guard be allowed to seize a royal's phone if it breaches protocol? Do you think the recording was meant to warn Camilla or expose her? And what would you have done in Sergeant Lockwood's place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. Hit like, tap subscribe, and press the bell icon so you never miss what really happens behind the Crown's locked doors. Share this video if you believe protocol should always outrank privilege. And don't go just yet. Your next story's already on screen. Watch it now, and I'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same watch.